G'day everyone, how you going? Welcome back to episode 6 of Isekai Yakkyoku. There isn't a lot to talk about today from a pharmacy point of view. However, I do have to put on my best Australian swimming cap on because the first half of this episode is to do with the sea, with the beach, and some safety things that you probably need to know about. The second half of the episode is mostly plot. I don't really have much to react to in that case, so instead of going through all that, I'll kind of give my general overview about how I think the show is going, and we'll take it from there. So we're starting a little bit further into the episode this time at about 6 minutes. The girls, Charlotte, his maid, and his little sister, whose name escapes me right now, Blanche, I think it is, have gone to swim in the sea. And he's reminiscing about how his other younger sister used to love being in the sea, and he couldn't take her to the beach one more last time before she passed away. So we'll start it from here. We'll go through up till when until the big thing happens, and then we'll chat about if you're stuck in that kind of situation in real life, what you should do. Because as an Australian, this isn't true for all Australians, by the way, but you know, I was kind of put in the water from a very young age, so I've had to deal with these kinds of water-based hazards before, and I can give a little bit of advice on it and direct you to better resources than myself about how to deal with these kinds of situations. So we'll talk about it when we get there. Let's go. Very fierce seas. Oh, that's right. Her name is Blanche. Yeah. So she's struggling right now. Not a great swimmer. It's unfortunate. All right. So right here, he says it's a rip current. So essentially what a rip is when you're at the beach and you're looking out to sea, you'll see as the waves kind of come in and out, you know, the waves will be cresting, and you'll see a lot of kind of white lines in the water essentially as they come towards you. A rip is a deeper channel somewhere along the beach that's flowing outwards, that all of this water that's coming towards you is starting to be funneled into and being pushed back out to sea. So you can usually spot rips by the fact that there's a kind of darker patch of water close to the beach, and there's no like the same pattern of waves coming in that particular patch. You might also notice that it's bringing a lot of sand back out to sea, so it might look a little bit cloudy, a little bit discolored. Essentially, it won't look the same as, you know, kind of other waves that are coming onto the beach. Now, rips are pretty hard to identify, at least in my experience when I've tried to identify them. But we got taught this a lot while we were in swimming school, that kind of thing, and how to deal with them in particular. So essentially what a rip does is it pulls you out to sea, because it's all this water that was rushing into the beach needs to go somewhere, and it's decided that that particular deep channel that the rip is in is the easiest, least obstructive path of least resistance. That's the thing I'm looking for. The path of least resistance in order to get back out to sea. So what happens usually is if you're caught in a rip, you will find yourself rapidly moving further out to sea. And if you're not a strong swimmer, this causes a lot of people to panic, which is not the best thing you can do. You can see in the anime here, it is kind of illustrating that a little bit. So you can see that there is a rip in the waves there, caused by, well, it's not caused by Blanche, but Blanche is at the head of it as these waves are coming into the beach. Now, his assistant should be able to keep up with him, actually, unless she's not a good swimmer, because the current should be moving with her. All of this rip is just pushing water back out to sea. That's all it is water flowing back out to sea. So it usually doesn't sink you, like pull you under. It might throw your legs out from underneath you, because all of this rushing water is trying to move outward, and then it will kind of push into your legs if you're in the water, and cause you to kind of lose your balance or lose your float in the water. So that's certainly a thing, but it shouldn't pull you under unless you're literally too tired to be able to keep treading water, or you don't have any flotation devices, that kind of thing. So the best thing you can usually do in a rip like this is to swim parallel to shore until you stop feeling that current underneath you. This is, of course, if you're a strong swimmer and you're pretty sure you know what you're doing. But essentially what you're doing by swimming parallel to shore instead is you're getting yourself out of that current to be able to then swim back to shore. Yeah, so that'll be a lot easier for you than trying to, fight the current back to shore. You're not going to win. Water is a terrifying force of nature sometimes, and you really should just get out of the way before you try to oppose it at any chance. Obviously, if you're a less confident swimmer, you don't have as much experience in the water, the best thing you can do is float on your back, try and conserve your energy, keep yourself alive, and get help. So put your hand up in the water and try and signal a lifeguard. But don't waste your energy. Don't try and fight the current, anything like that. Someone will come pick you up. That's easier. And it's more important that you conserve your energy to be able to stay afloat than it is to try and fight the current, no matter how much you may panic. And panicking is a bad thing in all emergency situations. So, in summary, what you should do if you find yourself in a rip is swim parallel to the rip if you know and recognize that you're in one and you're a strong swimmer and you're fairly certain of your abilities. If you're not a strong swimmer, float on your back, try and yell and put your hands up and try and grab attention so then someone can come pick you up. Of course, the best thing you can do in any situation is prevention is better than cure. So if you can, while you're on the beach before you go into the water, see if you can identify a rip by, those characteristics I mentioned before: darker patch of water, the waves aren't coming in at the same spot, discoloration, that kind of thing. And if you are at a beach that is patrolled by lifeguards, that kind of thing, swim between the flags, make sure people know what you're doing. And if you feel it is unsafe, don't go in the water. Just don't. It's not worth it, honestly. Because a rip, if you've never experienced a rip, it is very frightening. Especially because the current is rushing you out to sea, right? It's not pulling you closer to the shore, and water is a terrifying thing when it's not under your control. So, yeah, that's basically how you should take care of a rip. Hopefully that's been some interesting tidbit for you. I'll leave a link down below to the Surf Lifesaving Service. They've probably got more up-to-date information than I do. This is all stuff from back when I was in swimming school, and I think it should still be applicable today. It still makes sense. So you should be right, but we'll see how he deals with it. His particular solution is not exactly something we can replicate in real life, but it is interesting nonetheless. One more thing is that he should not be able to dive in that fast, below, because the current should be still too fast for him to actually get towards Blanche in a direct manner. Unless they're already out of the rip current and it's kind of already dispersed out to sea, then maybe, but I don't think he should be able to do that. Then again, it's been a long time since I've had to deal with these kinds of situations, so I could be wrong. But I don't think he should be able to do that. Someone can probably correct me in the comments if they've ever found themselves in this situation. Yeah, so the sea currents, if you think about it, would be pushing him further, and if she's just sinking, he should just kind of, if this is her, right, he should be being pushed out further because he's still got air in his body, right? So he should be still more buoyant. So even though he's trying to come at this steep angle straight towards her, the current would still probably be pushing her, further out to sea and past her, since she should be less buoyant because she's probably run out of air at this point, unfortunately. And then he activates his magical power. My God. Yeah, and then he just annihilates. He just basically, in a perfect circle, by the way, he just manages to activate his magic powers and completely remove all the water around him. So, you know, that's one way of taking care of a rip, is just making sure there's no water that can throw you around and stuff. Even catches his assistant in it. What a good guy. Yeah, so just to summarize, in real life, if you find yourself in a rip and you're not a very confident swimmer, try and float on your back. Don't try and fight the rip. You're not going to win. Grab attention if you can, wave your arms, yell out for attention, try and conserve your strength until you can feel the current has kind of let you go, and then try and swim back to shore. If you are a strong swimmer and you're sure of your abilities and you know you're in a rip, then you need to swim parallel to the shore till you're out of the rip and then come back into shore. Of course, rips aren't necessarily directly perpendicular to shore. They don't always just flow straight out. They can kind of curve around like that sometimes. And sometimes they can feed into other rips and things like that. So in general, wherever you can, stick with lifeguard patrolled beaches, swim between the flags, get flotation devices if you're not a particularly strong swimmer, like the arm floaties or even the rings, even the life rings, that kind of thing, if you're not a particularly strong swimmer, so then you can keep yourself afloat and keep yourself safe while you're having fun in the water. And of course, slip, slop, slap, in terms of, like, you know, sunscreen and keeping yourself out of the sun, making sure you don't get sunburnt, that kind of thing. So we'll move on from here. There is another section I want to look at with his maid after the fact, because she is pretty... Oh, well, Farmer thinks she's frightened because of what he did, the whole annihilation of water and what that implicates him in. But she has a very different perspective on things that just happened in the water.
何をです？俺の真実を見て怯えてただろ？いえ、ファルマ様の真実はすごかったです。迷わず海に飛び込んで行かれた姿もとても勇敢でした。ごめんなさい、ファルマ様。え？本当は私が助けに行くべきだったんです。申し訳ありません。
All right, number one, if you are not confident in your abilities to do whatever you think it was that you're going to do in an emergency situation, get help. Don't ever feel guilty that you can't do something that you weren't trained to do, right? In this case, her maid's 9, or his maid is 9, right? Like, you can't expect a 9-year-old to go save a 4-year-old in the sea in a rip, right? So the main takeaway is get help when you're not trained to do it, all right? And don't feel guilty about having to get help. You know, every first aid or emergency kind of instruction is remove yourself from danger, get help. You know, call your 000, 911, whatever your emergency number is, to get people who are trained to be able to handle the situation and let them deal with it. Because if you try and deal with it and you provide inadequate support, then it's just 2 casualties that are in the middle of the ocean or whatever. And that's a worse situation for everyone involved, right? It's worse for you, it's worse for the emergency services, it's worse for everyone in general. So just, if you're not confident in what you're doing, you haven't trained enough, you haven't done, you know, whatever skills you need to do, don't feel guilty that you couldn't do anything about it. Get help first, and then afterwards, if you really feel like you need to train those skills up because you think you're going to be finding yourself in those situations a lot more frequently, then go get training in first aid, CPR, emergency, whatever, right? Swimming, you know, that kind of thing. Survival, all the rest of it. But don't ever feel embarrassed that you need to get help when you are not trained to be able to deal with emergency situations. It is much better to get professional help faster than it is to try to provide, inadequate support, realize in the middle of it that you're inadequate, and then also need to get rescued, because that's just harder for everyone. Okay, so that's kind of all that I really wanted to touch on today from my perspective as an Australian and as a kind of pharmacist, healthcare professional. The latter half is kind of more about the plot, that kind of thing, which I appreciate. I think it's developing in a very nice way, particularly with the world building, that kind of thing. And it is reacting fairly realistically to farmers' special skills, that kind of thing. I do find it a little bit off-putting that Farmer is such a what's the word? He's so overpowered, I suppose. He's so OP. I know that's kind of the whole conceit of an isekai, is the fact that when you do get reincarnated, you're supposed to be pretty overpowered, and you can't do things that you could do, and you can do more things, in this new world than you could previously. But I personally think he's a little bit overpowered. And while it does sort of make sense, the world has provided an explanation, I think it would be more interesting if it was just the knowledge part of it, and then he had to kind of come up with workarounds for his particular medical knowledge, that kind of thing. But right now he's kind of more relying on his divine energy, and then producing literally modern medicine out of thin air, because magic, right? So, that's just a minor gripe for me. I think it would have been more interesting if he had to synthesize medications from kind of plants and other things in order to treat patients, because then you would see more of the whole medical development from, the first penicillins or whatever, for example, as antibiotics, all the way up to, modern rifampicin and vancomycin and all those other newer antibiotics that are a lot more potent. So that's personally sort of my tiny gripe with Isekai Yakkyoku. I actually think that this is fairly internally consistent with how it's kind of building its world and its characters to make sure that everything kind of works together. Obviously, there's still some things that are left unexplained with the whole divine arts thing, but the reaction from the church in terms of the Inquisition, things like that, does hold out, unfortunately, as in history, how art imitates life, etc. So I personally am really enjoying the series, otherwise I wouldn't be keeping you making these YouTube videos. I do just want to also throw a shout out for everyone who's subscribed lately for this series. I really appreciate it. And if you do enjoy watching these, please consider subscribing, liking the videos, commenting if you have any questions about pharmacy in general, or other advice that I've provided in these videos. Of course, I'm not always the main authority, and I always do encourage you to find second opinions and come to a consensus about what the best information is out there. So yeah, I think that'll about end it for this particular episode. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next week, I think, right? Episode 7? See you then.